Welcome to Crash Course Tech. If you are watching this, there is a good chance you are either thinking about sitting the AAISM Certificate exam or you already registered and you want to make sure you walk in there fully prepared. Either way, you are exactly the right place and I want to make sure this video earns your time. Here what we are going to do today. We are going to walk through Domain 1 Part A of the AAISM body of knowledge. And we are going to do it in a way that actually makes sense. No bullet points, no jargons, just the concept you need. So it will stick, explain the way I wish someone had explained them to me when I was preparing for my own certification. Before we get into the material, let me tell you a little bit about who I am. Because I think context matters when you are deciding whose exam prep content to trust. I have many years of experience working across IT and cybersecurity, across enterprise environment, different sectors, different scale of organization. And I share more about my background as this series develops. But what I want you to know right now is this. I set the exam, I know the material from inside, and everything I'm going to teach you is grounded in both the official body of knowledge. Let's move to the first slide, which is related to the AI governance blueprint. The title of this chapter is related to AI governance. And I want to spend a moment on that word blueprint because it's not accidental. When an architect draws a blueprint for a building, they are not just sketching ideas. They are creating a binding technical document that ensures every element of the structure works together safely, that load-bearing walls are in the right places, that the whole things won't collapse under its own weight or in adverse condition. The blueprint is what separates a building that stands for 100 years from one that fails on opening day. AI governance is the same things. It's a structural plan that allows an organization to build and operate AI systems in a way that is safe, ethical, strategical, sound, and genuinely valuable with it. Without it, you are pouring concrete without a plan. And in the AI space, that can go wrong very quickly and very publicly. This exam is going to test you not just on what AI governance is, but how it functions as a strategic discipline, how it distributes accountability, and how it keeps organizations on the right side of an increasingly complex regulatory environment. Keep that framing in mind as we work through the material. Let's move to the first real concept. In this slide, governance as the fulcrum, where it's necessary. In this slide and specifically this diagram is, in my view, the single most important model in domain 1, and I will be surprised if it didn't inform at least one questions on your exam. So let's really understand. On the left side of the scale, you have the forces driving AI adoption inside any organization. Automation, the ability to delegate repetitive, time-consuming tasks to systems that never get tired. Competitive pressures, because if your competitors are using AI and you are not, the gap compounds over time. Augmented creativity, AI as a tool that expands what your people can produce, not just what they can process. And operational efficiencies, doing more faster at lower cost. These are not abstract benefits. These are the reason boards and leadership teams are pushing AI adoption hard right now, often faster than their governance structure can keep up with. On the other side of the scale, and notice slide use gold to draw your eyes here, which is deliberate. Inheritance risk, human bias baked into training data. Model drift, where an AI system output quality degrades over time without anyone necessarily noticing. Hallucinations, where AI confidently generate information that is simply wrong. Data privacy breach, given that AI systems often process sensitive data at enormous scales. And black box decision making, where neither the organization nor the people affected by AI decisions can understand or challenge how those decisions were reached. On holding of these in balance, right at the fulcrum is AI governance. AAISM study material makes statement here that I think every leader needs to hear. Staff will use AI tools whether an organizational policy exists or not. And this is basically everywhere, not only this study material, but this is reality. Every company, everyone wants to use AI, regardless you have a policy or not. Read that again. The question is not whether your people are using AI. They are. The question is whether your organization has built a governance structure to manage what that means for risk, for compliance, for ethics, and for value creation. And that's why the AAISM framework explicitly states that governance must shift from mere legal compliance to sustaining long-term ethical standards and social responsibility. Passing a compliance audit is the floor, not the ceiling. Let me also make sure you know the 5 inherent risks by name. Human bias. AI learns from data created by humans, and humans carry biases. Those biases get encoded into the model, often invisibly. Next one, model drift. Over time, as the world changes, model trained on historical data can gradually become less accurate. The model doesn't alert you, you have to monitor for it. Hallucination. This is the term for when an AI system generates output that sound authoritative and fluent but is factually fabricated. We will cover this in depth when we get to the limitation side. Data privacy breach. AI systems are voracious consumer of data, and the more data, the greater the exposure surface. Privacy framework like GDPR and CPRA apply directly. Last but not the least, black box decision. Some AI architectures cannot explain how they reach a conclusion. Let's move to the next slide, which is related to enterprise readiness. Before an organization deploys AI at any meaningful scale, there is a fundamental question that needs to be answered. Are we actually ready for this? Not do we want AI? The answer to that is most always yes. Not have we approved a budget? Money is not that difficult part, but are the underlying governance structure, the risk framework, the talent, and the strategic alignment is placed to do this well? This slide frames enterprise readiness through 3 gauges. Think of them as the dashboard dials you check before setting off. The first is the benefit gauge. Are the expected gains from AI genuinely aligned with your organization's long-term strategy? And just as importantly, how are you measuring return on investment against realistic forecast rather than hype-driven assumption? A lot of organizations approved AI initiative on promise return that never materialized. Real readiness means your benefit assumptions are evidence-based and your measurements mechanisms are in place before deployment, not improvise after the fact. The second is the risk gauge, and notice it's highlighted in a gold in this slide. That's telling you something about its relative importance. Is AI integrated in your enterprise risk registered? Not as a footnote, as a full entry with ownership, controls, and review cadence. Are your privacy and security frameworks active and tested? Is bias mitigation built into your processes, not bolted on after something goes wrong? The third is resources gauge. Is funding properly allocated, not just for implementation, but for ongoing operations, maintenance, and talent? One of the most common failure point in enterprise AI is underfunding what happens after goes live. The system launches, attention shifts to the next initiative, and no one is properly resourced to manage what comes next. Below the gauges, you see the 5 pillars of information and technology governance that provide the foundation for all of this. Let me walk you through them briefly because they will come up throughout this course. Pillar 1 is mature INT governance process. AI governance cannot be stronger than underlying IT governance. It sits on top of it. If your organization's broader technology governance is immature or inconsistent, your AI governance will reflect that. Pillar 2, which is related to innovation management. AI is first and foremost an innovation. It needs to be managed through portfolio thinking, prioritizing initiatives, evaluate them against strategic values, and making deliberate decisions about what gets resourced and what doesn't. Pillar 3 is appropriate oversight structure. Committees, boards, audit functions, not informal working group, but formal bodies with clear mandates, defined membership, and documented decisions making authority. Pillar 4 is external compliance tracking. The regulatory environments for AI is evolving faster than almost any other area of technology law. Organizations need a live, maintained mechanism for tracking what's changing and what it means for their operations. And pillar 5 is the skilled resources. Governance decisions are only as good as the people making them. Having the right expertise, technical, ethical, legal, operation at the table is non-negotiable. Let's move to the next slide, which is related to the 4 operational quadrants. Here, a question I get a lot, especially from organizations just starting their AI journey. Who actually owns AI governance? Is it IT, the board, legal, or is it everyone? And the honest answer is it's all of them. But the way responsibility is distributed matters enormously. Because when everyone owns it and no one owns it clearly, things fall through the cracks. So let me show you the model the AAISM body of knowledge uses to structure this. A mature AI ecosystems distributes responsibility across 4 operational quadrants. Think of this less like a rigid org chart and more like 4 lenses. 4 different vantage points that each need to be active and coordinated for AI governance to actually work. Quadrant 1. Leadership and strategy. This is where your senior leadership team sit alongside your chief AI officer and your AI steering committee. Their job is to answer the big question, why are we doing this? What does success looks like? And how does AI fit into where the organization is heading over the next 3 to 5 years? These quadrants set direction for everything else. And I want to be clear about something. Senior leadership teams' accountability for AI is not optional, and it's not just symbolic. If the people at the top are not genuinely engaged in AI strategy, what tends to happen is that AI projects multiply at the operational level without any coherent directions, without proper risk assessment, and without alignment to what the organization actually needs. Leadership and strategy are the foundation everything else are built on. Quadrant 2, which is related to governance and oversight guardrails. Your governance committee lives here. So does risk management, information security, and internal auditor. Their collective focus is security, ethical adherence, and compliance. If you think of quadrant 1 is the navigator setting the destination and plotting the route, the quadrant 2 is the engineer constantly checking that the brakes work, the engine isn't overheating, and the vehicle is roadworthy. It's not about slowing things down for the sake of it. It's about making sure that when the organization accelerates, it does not veer off the road. Let's move to the next quadrant, which is related to development and operation execution. This is IT development, your data scientists, engineers, and developers working alongside IT operation and product management. This quadrant is where they actually get the built, deploy, and kept running. What important here is that quadrant 3 does not operate in isolation. Development and ops works within the boundaries that quadrant 2 sets and in service of the vision that quadrant 1 defines. Good governance means those connections are explicit and functional, not assumed, and not left to chance. Let's move to the last quadrant. That is related to users and applications. End users, human resources, customer service. These are the people who actually interact with AI day to day, either using it directly or supporting the people who do. This is the quadrant that in my experience get the least attention during AI planning. And it's responsible for more AI project failure than most organizations want to admit. You can have a technical, brilliant AI system with a strong governance structure, well aligned with strategic objectives, and still it fails because people using it were not properly trained, didn't understood how to get values from it, and were never brought along in the change management process. User adoption is a governance issue, not just a training issue. Now there is a compliance note at the bottom of the slide. That's worth highlighting because this is exactly the kind of things that come up in your exam. The EU AI Act draw a clear legal distinctions between 2 roles in AI ecosystem. The first is the provider. Any person or entity that develop an AI solutions and put it on the market, whether for a fee or a free. The second is the deployer. Any person or entity that use an AI system in a professional capacity. Why does this matter? Because each role carries fundamentally different legal responsibilities. A provider is accountable for how the system is built, its safety, its documentation, and its transparency. A deployer is accountable for how it's used, whether it's applied appropriately, whether human oversight is maintained, whether it's being used within the context it was designed for. In practice, many organizations are both. If you have built your own internal AI tool and your team use it professionally, you're wearing both hats. and the compliance obligations compound accordingly. We will go deeper into the regulatory landscape shortly, but lock that provider and deployer distinction in right now. Let's move to the next slide, which is related to governing bodies' responsibility. Let me ask you something. When an AI system makes a decision that causes real harm to a customer, maybe they will not able to get a loan, or we have dismissed an employee based on wrong analysis. Who is ultimately responsible for that? Not the data scientist who built the model, not the CTO who approved the deployment, not the AI itself. The answer under the AAISM governance framework is the governing body, the board of directors. And that accountability is described in a very specific language. It is non-delegible. That's what's matter. The board can absolutely delegate the day-to-day management of the AI system, but what they cannot hands off is accountability for the outcomes. That stay at the top, always. I have seen organizations where senior leaders genuinely believed that by appointing a chief AI officer or establishing a steering committee, they had effectively transferred their accountability for AI governance. But they can't. The governing body remain on the hook. So what does that responsibility looks like in practice? The AAISM body of knowledge breaks it down into 5 distinct areas. And I want to walk you through each one in a way that make it genuinely meaningful rather than just a list to memorize. The first is management. This is about embedding AI into the structural fabric of the organization. Its policies, resource allocation decisions, and its ethical codes and declaration of values. The governing bodies must ensure that formal instruments exist through which AI is directed, not a policy document gathering dust on the intranet, a living enforced framework. The second is supervision, and the key phrase here is risk appetite. The governing body does not just ask, is this risky? Because almost everything carries some risk. They ask, is this risk within the tolerance level we have defined for this organization? Those are very different questions. Supervision means holding AI decisions up against that calibrated position continuously, not just at the point of deployment. The third, evaluation. This is the outward looking function, scanning the environments for internal and external threats, assessing whether the governance mechanisms that have been put in place are actually working, and identifying where the organizations may be falling short. The governing body must keep asking, are we still on top of this? The fourth is reporting. AI governance is not a private matter. The governing body is accountable not just internally, but to external stakeholders, regulators, customers, investors, the public in some cases. Reporting means demonstrating proactively and transparently that AI is being governed responsibly. It builds trust, and in tightening regulatory environments, it reduces legal exposure. Last but not the least, which is one that often gets underestimated, is the change management. When AI enters an organization, it does not just add a new tool to the existing workflow. It fundamentally alters shift how work gets done, who does what skills matter, what process looks like. The governing body is responsible for overseeing that transformation deliberately, not just absorbing it chaotically. Now, there is something else on this side I want to spend a moment on, because it's one of those concepts that AAISM exam will test, and it's also one of the most practical relevant ideas in this entire domain. Look at the warning box in the top right corner of the slide. It flags a critical risk called anthropomorphising. Anthropomorphising AI means attributing human qualities to something that isn't human. We do this with technology more often than we realize, and we do it with AI systems, especially large language model that produce fluent, confident, human-sounding response. When board member reads an AI-generated risk assessment and think the system understood the situation, that's anthropomorphizing. When senior leaders assume an AI model decided on the base course of action, or that is known when something is ethically problematic, that's anthropomorphizing. It matters enormously for the governance because moment you start attributing human judgment to a machine learning algorithm, you start relaxing your own oversight. You start trusting in a way that aren't warranted. You start stepping back from the very accountability that governance require. AI is not thinking, isn't understanding. It isn't making moral judgment. What it's doing is recognizing pattern in data and generating output that fits those patterns. And that's genuinely impressive engineering. But it's still not human judgment, and the governing body must never confuse the two. When you treat the AI as an agent with its own judgment, you create a governance vacuum, and that vacuum is where harm happens. Let's move to the next slide, which is related to stakeholder networks. Here are some things that catches a lot of organization off guard when they deploy AI for the first time. The effects don't stay contained. They ripple outward, touching people and groups that may be nowhere near the system itself. And governance that doesn't account for that ripple effect will fail because it's only managing the technology, not the impact. This diagram uses a concentrating circle model to show how AI implementations affect different stakeholder groups at a different distance from the system itself. At the center is the AI system itself. Just outside that is the internal ring, are your IT teams. The people focus on infrastructure reliability and data quality, because those are the foundation that determine whether the AI works properly. And then you have employees who are often dealing with a much more personal questions. What does this mean for my day-to-day work? And is my job still safe? I want to pause on that second concerns for a moment because it's deserve more than a bullet point. Employee anxiety about AI is real. It's widespread. And it is a governance issue, not just an HR issue. If employees doesn't trust AI systems, they expect it to alongside. And if they feel those systems are surveilling them or replacing them without transparency, their engagement, their willingness to use the tools, and ultimately the organization's return on the AI investment will suffer. Governing AI well means governing its human impact well. In the external ring, the picture broadens further. Senior leadership is focused on ROI and strategic alignment. And they need to see that the AI investment is paying off in measurable ways. Customers are concerned about privacy and fairness. Are their data being handled responsibly? And are the decision of the AI makes about them fair and unbiased? Regulators are watching for compliance. In many industries, they are watching closely and with increasingly sophistication. Third parties, including partners and vendors, care about integration and alignments with their own practice. And society at large has a legitimate interest in whether AI systems are being deployed sustainably and inclusively, or in ways that cause broader harms. The action flow at the bottom of this slide gives you the 5-step process for managing all of this, and I want you to notice something important about it. The process starts with mapping and end with continuous monitoring. There is no done. Stakeholder management in the context of AI is an ongoing operational discipline because the stakeholder landscape evolves as the system evolves. Map stakeholders, priorities that concerns, engage and communicate, guide via ethical framework, and continuous monitor. That sequence is directly because the stakeholder landscape evolves as the system evolves. In this slide, one of the most common patterns I have seen in organizations that struggle with AI governance is the AI initiatives start with enthusiasm, an informal team gets pulled together and things move quickly until they don't. Scope balloons, prioritize conflict. Nobody agreed on what success looks like. And by the time someone thinks to establish formal governance, the project is already in trouble. The antidote to that pattern is formalizing intents from the very beginning through two instruments, AI Charter and AI Steering Committee. Let's take each one in turn. Let's talk about AI Charter. Think of the charter as the constitutions for your AI initiative. It does not just describe the project, it defines the terms under which projects operates, what it's accountable for, and that's it allowed to do. The objective section is where you turn good intention into something measurable, not improve customer experience, which sound nice but tell you very little. Instead, you want something specific like reduce first call resolution time by 20% within 12 months using AI assisted customer service tools. Because if the objective is vague, accountability will be vague too. The scope section is, in some ways, the most critical part. It defines not just what the initiative covers, but explicitly what it does not cover. That out of scope boundaries is what stops scope creep, the slow expansion of an AI project beyond its original purpose, until people lose sight of the problem it was meant to solve in the first place. Beyond that, the charter should set out the project timeline and the key milestones, so there are clear checkpoints for accountability. It should spell out the resources required: people, technology, and funding, along with the risk mitigation measure for the specific risk this initiative creates. And it should define the success metrics upfront: ROI target, adoption rates, and KPI that will tell you whether the initiative was actually worth doing. The charter also explicitly includes accountability for the change management, because deploying AI is not just a technical event, it's an organizational event. The charter acknowledges that upfront and assigned responsibility for navigating it. Let's talk about steering committee. Steering committee is the cross-functional body that provides strategic oversight throughout the AI project lifecycle. Not just at the launch, throughout. Major decisions, budget change, scope adjustment, responses to emerging risk flow through this body. Its composition is designed to ensure that no single perspective dominates. You need two chairperson, typically the CIO or CTO, to provide executive authority. Project sponsorship bring funding accountability. Domain experts from the relevant business units bring the real world context that pure technical team often lack. Technical experts, data scientists, infosec professional bring the depth to evaluate whether what's being proposed is actually safe and feasible. And compliance officer bring the legal and ethical lens that ensures the initiative stays within appropriate boundaries. Regular scheduled meeting, monthly or quarterly, depending on the project pace, plus ad hoc sessions when critical decisions can't wait. This is not a committee that meets once or dissolve. It's an ongoing governance body for the lifetime of the AI initiative. Move to the next slides, which is related to the global regulatory metrics, which is very important subjects for this exam. If internal governance is about what organizations choose to do, external compliance is about what they are required to do. And right now, the regulatory picture of AI is genuinely complex. Not because any single regulation is spatially complicated, but because there are multiple frameworks operating in parallel across different jurisdictions with a different scope, different risk classification, and different consequences for non-compliance. For any organization operating across borders, understanding these metrics is not optional. Let me walk you through the four major frameworks on this slide. The EU AI Act. This is the most comprehensive and significant AI regulations currently in force anywhere in the world. It applies to providers and the users of AI in the EU and uses a 4-tier risk classification systems, which is prohibited, high, limited, and minimal risk. Prohibited AI means AI applications that are simply not permitted, includes things like real-time biometric surveillance in public spaces and social systems. High-risk AI covers applications with the significant consequences. The penalties under EU AI Act are severe by any standard, up to 35 million euros or 7% of global annual revenue, whichever is higher for the most serious violation. And transparency requirements are explicit. Chatbots must disclose their AI, and high-risk AI systems require detailed documentation. The United States S.3312 and the state laws, also notably more fragmented than the EU's. At the federal level, S.332 focuses on high-impact and critical impact AI systems, with penalties reaching $500,000 or twice the value of AI system, plus potential deployment ban. But you also need to be across the state level laws. California, Texas have each introduced their own AI legislations with specific requirements that apply within their jurisdiction. Let's discuss more about Brazil PL 2338. Brazil framework uses 3 risk categories: excessive, high, and low, and penalties can reach 50 million or 2% of annual revenue. Disclosure of AI usage is core transparency requirements. Brazil's fragment is significant because it signals that comprehensive AI regulation is not purely European or North American phenomena. Even South Korea has their own framework. Basic Act South Korea's framework center on high impact AI systems. Now here is the broader insight this slide is pointing to. Multinational enterprises, they operate across all of them concurrently, navigating a regulatory matrix where the rules can conflict, where definitions doesn't always align, and where the pace of regulatory change means that's what's compliant today may not be compliant in 18 months. The study material called this regulatory gap. Finance lags despite the significant AI deployment happens in that sector. Education is in the even earlier stage of governance maturity. In the upcoming slides is more about voluntary industry frameworks. Regulations tell you what you must do. Frameworks help you figure out how to do it responsibly and what responsible actually means when the law doesn't specify. Think of these 4 voluntary frameworks as the structural columns holding up the concept of responsible AI. They are called voluntary because there is no regulatory enforcing them. But in practice, for any organization serious about AI governance, these frameworks are anything but optional. They represent the accumulated thinking of international standard bodies, governments, and engineering communities about what good AI governance looks like. Ignoring them is a choice, but it's not neutral one. The same as ISO 42001 and 23053, published by International Organization for Standardization and the International Electrotechnical Commission. These are the global benchmark for establishing and maintaining AI management system. ISO 42001 specifically focus on ethical use, transparency, and accountability in AI governance. It outlines the requirements for creating, implementing, maintaining, and continuous improving an AI management system. If your organization wants independent certification of its AI governance, something you can point to externally, this is the standard you had pursued. IEEE 7000 2021, published by the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. This is the engineering standards for amending human values into AI system design. The keyword there is design, not retrofit. IEEE 7000 2021 gives AI developer a framework to address privacy, fairness, and transparency during the actual deployment lifecycle, not as an afterthought once the system is already built. Ethical as architecture, not ethical as patch. The most important framework. NIST AI Risk Management Framework, developed by the US National Institute of Standards and Technology. This is the conclusive US framework for identifying, assessing, and mitigating operational AI risk. The next one is OECD AI Principle. The Organizations for Economic Cooperation and Development represents countries across North America, South America, Europe, and the Asia Pacific. Its AI principle represent broadest international consensus available on what's responsible AI looks like. 4 key principles for this framework: transparency, inclusiveness, sustainability, and accountability. And these are not just a good intention on paper. They help shape many of the national AI regulatory frameworks we see today. Together, these 4 frameworks address a gap that regulations alone cannot fill. An organization can pass every compliance audit and still operate irresponsibly because compliance sets a floor, not a ceiling. Voluntary frameworks defines what genuinely responsible practice looks like above that floor. Let's move to the next slide, which is related to COBIT governance framework. COBIT is one of the framework you need to understand deeply for the AAISM exam. Not just what it is, but how its specific domain map into the AI lifecycle. Because that mapping is directly testable, and if you understand it clearly, it becomes one of the most useful thinking tools you have for answering scenario-based questions. COBIT was originally developed to help organizations align IT governance and management with the business objective. What the AAISM body of knowledge does is take COBIT's 5 core domains and show you exactly how they apply to AI. From the initial design of a system all the way through to ongoing operations and performance monitoring. And notice what sits at the center of the diagram: business value. Not compliance, not technical performance, but business value. COBIT entire logic is that governance and management discipline exist to deliver value to the organization, not as an its themselves. Keep that in mind as we go through the domains. The first domain, which is Evaluate, Direct, Monitor, EDM. In this design phase, at the very beginning of AI initiative, the EDM domain, Evaluate, Direct, Monitor domain, ensure that what you are proposing to build or acquire is genuinely aligned with the organization's overall strategy. This is where leadership evaluate AI potential impact on the business, direct resources towards the right initiatives, and establish the monitoring objective that will determine whether the initiative succeeded. This is governance is in its most forward-looking strategic form. The second domain is APO, align, plan, and organize. It's part of development phase. As the initiative moves into development, the APO domain help organizations establish the management structures and processes need to build AI systems that are secure, trustworthy, and compliant. This means setting clear policies for data governance, planning for bias mitigations, and security vulnerabilities, ensuring legal and regulatory requirements are addressed before code is written, not after it's deployed. The next domain is BAI, build, acquire, implement, which is again part of the deployment phase. When it comes time to actually integrate the AI system into the business, this domain, build, acquire, implement domain, takes over. Whether the organization is building in-house or purchasing from a vendor, BAI principles ensure that implementation is secure, properly tested, and validated. Critically, this domain also covers change management, making sure the introduction of the AI system doesn't disrupt existing processes or create unforeseen risk in how the organization operates. The next domain is DSS, Delivery Service Support. It's part of operation phase. Once the system is live, DSS, Delivery Service Support, governs the day-to-day operation and ongoing support. It ensures that service levels are maintained, that cybersecurity controls are active and tested, and that the system continue to perform as intended. This is the domain that catch the things deployment miss, the edge cases, the unexpected usage pattern, the gradual drift in performance that can develop over time. Last but not the least, MEA domain, monitor, evaluate, access, which is part of continuous loop. And finally, MEA domain, which create basically the continuous feedback mechanism that ensure the AI system remains fit for the purpose, not just at launch, but throughout its operation life. MEA measures performance against business goals, assesses compliance with evolving regulations, evaluates risk against the organization's risk appetite, and identifies whether models need to be refined or retired. This is how you catch models drift before it becomes a governance failure. Let's discuss about CSA 4 Pillars framework. The CSA stands for Cloud Security Alliance. The Cloud Security Alliance 4 Pillars framework give us something quite specific and practical. A set of structured documentation tool that enforce transparency in AI systems and help organizations anticipate failure before it happens. Let me walk you through each pillar and then explain why the feedback loop connecting them matter as much as the pillar themselves. Let's start with model card. A model card is at its core the AI system passport. It provides a transparent, comprehensive overview of the machine learning model, what it was designed to do, what data it was trained on, and what it's capable of, what its known limitations are, and how it's performing adversarial conditions, and where it should and shouldn't be used. Think of this way. If you can't produce a model card for your AI system, you don't fully understand what you have built. And if you don't fully understand what you have built, you cannot govern it responsibly. Model card makes the implicit explicit. Data documentation. If model card explains the AI system, this next piece explains the data behind it. It documents the training data used to build the model, where that data came from, what it includes, what format it uses, what it was meant to support, and where its limitation or possible bias might be. The last part really matters. When AI produces biased result, the problem often starts with training data. This data documentation helps make those issues visible early, so they can be reviewed, monitored, and reduced before the system causes harm. Most important card, which is risk card, where model cards and data documents what the system is. Risk card document what could go wrong. They systematically identify and categorize potential risk issue observed during development and deployment, explain what remediations are currently in the place or plan, and outline the anticipated user behavior that could create or amplify those risks. Risk cards are the AI equivalent of hazard assessment. They ensure that the people responsible for governance have a complete, structured picture of the risk landscape associated with the system, not a vague sense that there are some risks, but a documented inventory. In the scenario planning, takes risk thinking a step further. It asks what might go wrong that we haven't thought about it. It works through possible situations where the AI could be misused, fail, or behave in an unexpected way. In other words, it stress tests the system against edge cases, hostile inputs, and conditions it may not handle well. And the point of doing that is practical. The lesson from those scenarios feeds straight into the organization risk control and mitigation plan. And the most important portion of this slide is feedback loop. And here what makes the whole framework as a system. The feedback loop, these four pillars are connected. They don't sit off to the side doing separate jobs. Model cards and training data documentation give you the context for understanding risk. Risk card helps shape the scenario you test, and what you learn from those scenarios feeds back into the system and improving the model, prompting retraining, or in some cases, showing that the system needs to be redesigned or even retired. It's a continuous improvement cycle built into the governance architecture of the AI system. Not a one-time exercise, but an ongoing process. In these slides, we're going to discuss more about limitations of generative AI. Before we get into this slide, I want to make one thing clear. Understanding AI limitation is not being negative. It's a part of using AI responsibly. You can't build effective control around a system if you don't understand how it can fail. So let's look at those limitations clearly. Generative AI has a 6 built-in limitations that every governance professional needs to understand. These are not bugs that will disappear in the next update. They are part of how this system works. You can improve them, but you cannot remove them completely. So the job of governance is not to pretend they will go away. It's to put the right control around them. Let's start with the first one, unexpected results. AI output depends a lot on the quality of the prompt. If the prompt is unclear, vague, or badly structured, the AI won't stop and ask follow-up questions the way a person would. It will still generate an answer, and that answer can miss what the user meant. In an enterprise settings where AI outputs might end up in decisions, in an enterprise settings where AI output might end up in reports or customer communication, that become a real governance risk. That's why organizations need clear prompting standard and review process for AI generated content. The next one, inaccurate output. AI can produce answers that are simply wrong on its own. That's manageable if someone checks the output before using it. The bigger governance risk comes when those wrong outputs get fed back into the future training. Once bad data start influencing later model, the problem doesn't stay contained. It spreads, and over time it can make the system even less reliable. The next limitations, lack of context. A generative AI system's knowledge is bounded by its training data. Ask it about something that happened after its training cutoff, and it either doesn't know or generate a plausible sounding but incorrect answer. Ask it about a highly specific internal process or niche technical domain that wasn't well presented in training data, and the same things happen. From a governance perspective, this means AI should never be treated as an authoritative source for time-sensitive or highly specialized information without external verification. The next limitation is response constraint. AI systems have built-in limits on the kind of content they can produce. Those limits are there for a good reason. They help block harmful, illegal, or unsafe outputs. But they can also affect legitimate use cases in sensitive areas. That's why governance needs to account for them. If your AI use case touches restricted topics, you need to understand those limits before the system goes live. The most important limitation, systematic bias. Bias in AI outputs doesn't only come from poorly written prompt. It comes from the training data itself. Data that reflect the historical biases, exclusions, and blind spots of the world in which it was created. An AI model trained on decades of hiring data will replicate the hiring bias of those decades. Useless, deliberate steps are taken to identify and mitigate that. Governance must include active ongoing bias monitoring, not a one-time check at deployment. Last but not the least limitation, token limits and hallucination. These two are grouped together but are distinct problems. Token limits means that in long, complex interactions, an AI model will eventually lose track what was discussed earlier in the conversation. It run out of working memory, in effect, and continuity breakdown. For a complex workflow where context accumulates over time, this is a real operational constraint. Hallucinations are something else entirely, and they deserve particular attention. A hallucination is when an AI system generates information that is entirely or partially fabricated, but present it with the same tone of confidence and fluency as information that is accurate. The model is not lying. It doesn't have the capacity to lie. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do, generating the most statistical problem continuation of the text. Sometimes that continuation happens to be factually wrong. The governance implication is significant. Human reviewer often can't detect hallucinations without external verification because AI tone gives no signals that something is wrong. This means every high-stake AI output requires human review against independent source, a control that must be built into the process, not left to the discretion of the individual user. In the next slides, let's discuss more about building the AI business case. Every AI initiative should be grounded in a documented business case, not a slide deck with aspirational projections. A rigorous, structured justification that answers the questions. Why are we doing this? What will actually cost us, and how will we know if it's work? These slides frames that calculus with a formula that I think is genuinely elegant in its clarity. Value equal benefits minus implementation cost plus operational cost plus risk mitigation. That's it. Everything you need to justify an AI investment is contained in those 5 terms. Let me unpack each one. The benefit of AI clustered around 3 areas. First, efficiency and process automation. The ability to delegate repetitive, time-consuming tasks to systems that can run continuously, consistently, and at scale, freeing your people to focus on higher value work. Second, better decision. AI ability to process and surface insights from volumes of data that no human team could work through in a useful time frame. And third one, which is cost reduction. Lower labor cost, fewer errors, faster processes. These benefits are real, but the business case must quantify them against realistic baselines, not against theoretical base case scenarios. Cost aspect, implementation cost include licensing, development work, and employee training. But the cost that organization most consistently underestimates are operational. Ongoing system maintenance, the energy consumption of running large AI models at scale, and the salaries required to attract and retain the subspecialist, specialist talent needed to manage them. Building a business case without a realistic operational cost model is one of the most common cause of AI ROI disappointment. Risk mitigation is the cost component that is the most frequently omitted from early business case, and its omission is a governance failure. Privacy protection infrastructure, reputation management protocols, bias monitoring systems, compliance mechanisms, all of these have a real cost that belong in the business case from the day one. If your business case for AI doesn't include a line item for risk mitigation, it isn't a complete business case. The strategic insight highlight on this slide is worth dwelling on. Leveraging established cloud AI tools like enterprise deployment of ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, Claude Code, and similar platform removes much of the development variability and upfront cost associated with building AI from scratch. If your business case can be met with a proven solution, that is almost always the lower cost, lower risk, more predictable options. The AAISM body of knowledge is also clear that without a clearly articulate problem and documented business case to address it, AI projects fail. Not because the technology doesn't work, but because no one agreed on what success looked like. Identifying the problem comes first. Selecting the technology comes second, and that's the order matter. The AAISM exam will test the component of a complete business case. If a scenario presents a business case that includes benefits and implement cost, but omits risk mitigation costs, that is an incomplete and flow business case. The correct governance practice include all three cost categories from the outset. We have spent a lot of time in these sessions talking about risk, compliance, accountability, and the things that can go wrong. And that's right, and necessary governance is fundamentally about managing risk. But I want to make sure we leave this domain with the full picture, because AI governance, when it's done well, is not just a risk management exercise. It's a value creation engine. Governance is not peripheral to AI value. It is central to it. The AAISM material makes clear that strong governance is what enables organization to scale beyond the pilot stage. Without governance, AI initiatives tends to stall. With governance supported by accountability, oversight, structured change management, and continuous monitoring, organizations can move from experimentations to scale value delivery. The framework also makes clear that ROI is not purely financial. Human outcomes, including employee satisfaction and customer experience, form part of the return on AI investment. These factors may be less straightforward to measure than cost savings, but they remain governance relevant and strategically important. If ROI measurement captures only the most convenient metrics, it is incomplete by definition. Exam tip: the AAISM exam may present an ROI evaluation scenario and ask whether it's complete. A complete ROI framework for AI includes financial metrics such as cost reduction and revenue growth, and human metrics such as employee satisfaction and customer experience. If either dimension is missing from the framework in the scenario, that's the gap you are being asked to identify. Here is the end of this module of the AAISM exam prep video. Let's bring it all together. We started with fundamental premise that AI governance is a fulcrum between innovation and risk. Not a compliance checkbox, but a strategic discipline that determines whether AI creates genuine value or cause genuine harm. We look at how enterprise AI readiness need to be assessed honestly across three dimensions: benefits, risk, and resources, underpinned by 5 pillars of INT governance that every mature AI program needs beneath it. We mapped the 4 operational quadrants: leadership, governance, developments, and user, and made the point that all 4 need to be active and coordinated. Governance does not work when it's concentrated in one place. We established that the board of directors were ultimate, non-delegible accountability for AI outcomes, and walk through the 5 specific responsibilities that flow from management, supervisions, evaluation, reporting, and change management. And we talk about anthropomorphizing AI, the critical governance risk of treating statistical systems as though they exercise human judgment. We follow the ripple effect of AI implementation out through the full stakeholder network, internal and external, and establish that stakeholder management in this context is a continuous, ongoing discipline, not a one-time engagement. We covered how to formalize AI governance through an AI charter and steering committee, the instruments that turn strategic intent into accountable execution. We navigated global regulatory metrics, the EU AI Act, US legislation, Brazil, South Korean, and understood why multinational organizations face genuinely complex compliance landscape that has no single unified answer. We look at the 4 voluntary frameworks that define responsible AI practice above the compliance flow. We applied COBIT's 5 governance domains to the AI lifecycle, from design through development to deployment to operations and continuous monitoring, and understood how each domain maps to a specific phase. We examined the CSF 4 pillars: model card, datasets, risk card, and scenario planning as a practical toolkit for transparency and failure anticipation, connected by a feedback loop that makes it a continuous improvement system. We confronted the 6 structural limitations of generative AI: unexpected results, inaccurate outputs, lack of context, response constraints, systematic bias, and hallucinations. and understood why governing around them it's not optional. And we build the AI business case, value equals benefit minus all three categories of cost, and grounded it in evidence that well-governed AI programs deliver measurable material returns. This is a substantial body of knowledge. If you found this video useful, please subscribe. If you have a question about the material, drop them in the comment. I read them and I will answer them as soon as possible. And share this video with anyone you know who is on the AAISM journey. The more people preparing together, the better. Please make sure you use the official AAISM review manual alongside this video as part of your exam preparation. Next up is a Domain 1 Part B, where we go deeper into AI risk management, the ethical framework, and practical governance control that bridge strategy and execution. This is a crash course tech. Let's go and get certified. Thank you.